Welcome to The Courage Effect. I'm Suzanne Weller, and this is a show about growth and unleashing what's possible. You will hear inspiring stories about what courage looks like, how we navigate what's getting in our way, and the opportunities that surface when we choose courage over comfort. Let's get started. Every breakthrough in human history started with someone saying it was blasphemy. Copernicus, Galileo, just the idea that the Earth wasn't the center of the universe. And according to my guests today, the same things happen in organizations every day. We have all seen it. Somebody challenges the prevailing truth and the room flinches. My guest today is Brent Robertson, a dear friend, founder of Be Generative, and a TEDx speaker. And I also describe him as a professional provocateur. Brent works with leaders who refuse to settle for just better and are ready to leap into the beyond. He has over 25 years of experience as an entrepreneur and a strategic advisor. He helps individuals and organizations move from complacency to collective ownership, truly unlocking their bold visions, getting that performance and that innovation they really want and need. Brent challenges leaders to not just grow their business, but to grow themselves and to really live into the lives they're building. In this conversation, we talk about what it really means to create the environment around you, not just respond to it. We talk about the 3 levels of listening that most leaders rarely achieve, and what Brent calls the conspiracy against the status quo. And that's what strong leadership requires. We also have some hard conversations about the truths that we have received, what he calls the love punches, and how they changed our lives. They made us different leaders and different humans. It's a wonderful conversation. Brent, thank you again for joining me for it. And for all of you listening, this one is going to stay with you. So let's go. Brent, such a joy to have you here. Welcome to The Courage Effect.
Thank you for having me. Excited about this conversation.
We met in a very interesting experience last year through the grad program at Heroic Public Speaking, and we went pretty deep, pretty fast in that group. So I feel like I know you deeply in certain ways, and then there's other ways that I don't really know you. So I'm thrilled to have you on the show. I know we have a lot of shared passions and that we do similar work. And as we start this conversation, my entrance question for you is, tell me about blasphemy.
Blasphemy. What a cool word. I mean, just this. It's fun to say, and it makes a point for me. The way I refer to or use that word is to describe the reaction when someone challenges the prevailing truth of the time. As our almost reflexive reaction to anything new is to call it blasphemy. And if you look through the infinite chapters of the human species as we move through our advanced stage of animalhood, the moments that took us over the threshold into new realms of discovery, new realms of possibility, into creating a world beyond what was, always had to do with pushing up against the prevailing truth of the time. And one of my favorite stories I like to share about that has to do with Copernicus. And, well, we'll put it this way. If it weren't for, I would say not the bravery of Copernicus, I would say the bravery of Galileo that came after him. But if it weren't for people like Copernicus and his allies, we'd still be living in a world that believed that the Earth was the center of the universe. And as the story goes, the prevailing truth of the time, of course, that was unquestioned, was religious doctrine. And that's just how it was. And it's sort of like, well, that, any knowledge that we needed to understand was in the book. And there was nothing else to talk about. And then Copernicus, in his curiosity, started making observations about certain behaviors of those lights in the sky that we didn't fully understand, that didn't match. And he knew, though, that it was going to be so wildly controversial to propose the heliocentric model, which positions the sun in the center of what we thought was the universe, certainly our solar system. And he knew it was going to be hard to hear that. And so he actually waited till the end of his life before he published his work. Sort of squeamishly published it, died, and it was immediately banned from reading or access to it once the religious authorities at the time got a hold of it, except Galileo, of course, who grabbed a copy, and it influenced his life quite a bit. And he, in fact, as he propagated the idea, was actually imprisoned for the remainder of his life as a heretic. So it wasn't until Newton came along and showed the math behind it that actually what was truer than the story that was a prevailing truth at the time finally came into existence as the new normal. This at a time when even the idea of scientific exploration was a brand new concept. So anyway, blasphemy is that way in which we, slam our fist down and say you're crazy. And it's usually when an idea sounds crazy, there's probably something to it.
Hell yes. You have me thinking about, first of all, we need to read banned books. And
Yes.
I hate that there's even banned books in the world now, and in our country, but so read banned books. But how did blasphemy become important to you? How did this become something that really drove you and led you to really want to disrupt leadership in a way that was emergent and generative?
It really goes back to understanding the nature of any organized system, which is it goes from non-existent to existence. And once something exists, then our tendency is to want to codify it, perfect it, make it efficient, document everything. And the moment we do that, we have a status quo. The minute we go from non-existent to existent, we now have a status quo at certain states of maturity. And if a leader endeavors to grow an organization, one has to really realize that, okay, the status quo of an organization is always trailing behind the ambitions for its future. And actually stepping into a new reality requires a conspiracy against the status quo. Meaning that and in fact, one of the great case studies that we have of recent history has to do with an enormous organization where we introduced the line breaking new ground, which in and of itself encouraged what we call beautiful breakage, which is what about the status quo is no longer serving us that we need to clear out of the way in the spirit of creating things that allow for the future to exist or allow for higher performance. And so even in the language of the story of our job, right? Every week, we don't just celebrate how many things we got done. We celebrate how many things did we get out of our way and how many new things did we create in the spirit of living into a future beyond what the past says is possible. So I talk a lot about what, as it relates to creating new realities, is a function of three major things. One, creating a new story of what that reality could be, or the possibility for the future. What's the narrative of it? The second is finding out who shows up around that story. Those are your allies. And then who's willing to put skin in the game and make that reality a possibility. Those are your accomplices. And so if we use, that language is kind of fun, right? That any new vision for an organization's future is a conspiracy against its status quo. That's a powerful way to sort of think about what we're actually doing. That's why it can be so difficult. Because our preference and bias will always be to what's familiar to us. Even if it sucks, we'll favor the familiar because we know it, and our brain actually favors it because it doesn't have to think about it. It knows what it's going to be like. We favor what we know. We favor what's familiar. We favor the stories where we've lived. And it keeps us, if we're not open to anything else, it keeps us trapped in a self-repeating reality.
Yeah, rinse and repeat. So how did you first get interested in being the provocateur that you are?
There was an interesting moment. I mean, I've always been... I've never been interested in small talk. I've always been willing.
I'm shocked.
And it's not anything more than like trivializing it. It's more like if I'm gonna take effort to engage another human being, like let's go there. Let's talk about stuff that matters. Let's like have a conversation that matters. And so I've never built sort of my curiosity drives my willingness to ask big, dangerous questions. And that's been true for a long time. But there was a critical moment as, so my second company, my business partner and I merged two companies together and created an agency that was really at the forefront of digital marketing, those kinds of things. And we were really good. We were really good at building these beautiful, ambitious, and aspirational brand narratives and brand expressions for companies of all shapes and sizes. And one day I kind of asked the question, I'm like, well, who's teaching you how to live into this story? And nobody had an answer. And there were many reasons for that, right? One would be those kinds of endeavors are in the hands of marketing. That's a separate function, separate from, senior leadership or whatever it may be. But when I asked the question, I saw there was like a vacuum on the other end of that question. That's when my first epiphany opened up to say, well, there's obviously a gap here. What would it look like to create something that would help organizations live into the stories that they want to tell? And that's where it all started. And that sort of then meeting a community of others in the field, that was when the rocket ship took off.
So storytelling, it was really founded in storytelling.
It was, yeah. Yeah, and it's funny, it's come back to rediscovering the power of intersubjective narratives as the most formidable force that we have access to and can create. And we're all operating inside of, whether we know it or not. And so that's really been where the work has been pushing toward, is how is it that we actually thoughtfully design narratives that will carry us powerfully into new realities, is where the leverage is.
I love that. Well, and it's so true about, because we as humans are meaning-making machines. So it's the idea of like, how do we latch on to something, going back to the status quo conversation from before, right? Like, what's normal, and I say that in air quotes, the idea of what's normal, latching onto it, wanting to drive efficiencies or to drive ease or comfort in some way. And the idea of our meaning, so much of what we create, I think, are the very things that box us in, right?
Yeah. Well, it goes back to the one of the sort of the fundamentals, which is we live in language. What we say is how it is. And it's funny, I was talking about this earlier today. One of the things that really breaks my heart is when I see either individuals or groups of people from the viewpoint of the leader are trapped in a story they have of them. And it's usually the story of what they're not and they wish they were. And I hear that all the time, and it's a real tragedy, because the idea would be the only thing my team's capable of is the behavior I see, instead of the only thing my team is capable of is where the limits to my growth and development lie.
Yeah, myopic.
Yeah.
Did you ever fall into that?
Which part?
being myopic. I'm just trying to think. Obviously, as we do our work, we support organizations and leaders to figure out new possibilities, to challenge themselves, right? To be that provocateur themselves. And I'm curious, I have my stories of what got me here, and you've heard some of them, but I'm curious for you, what are maybe some of the patterns or the stories that you fell into the past that you wanted to break?
Oh gosh. Yeah, plenty. It's still in them. Working on it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There's some, well, I'll say this, and it was said to be many, many years ago by a gentleman named Mel Toomey, which is, there's one thing that is and will always be in the way of the future of your business, and that's me. And what that means is, if I want the organization to grow, I must also be growing. And so I've lived on both sides of that story. And one side of the story would be where I'm feeling pretty right about something, which tends to breed, that attitude of righteousness. And that can certainly get you into a very limited view. The other side of it, though, that I experience more often is that I'm like, here's the organization, and like, I'm over here. I've already seen a new view. I'm already up to something else while the team's trying to catch up to what already exists. And it's sort of the tension between those two spaces that is actually really healthy. It's not healthy when, you are single-mindedly pushing forward and then just frustrated with the fact that no one's coming along with you. That's definitely a game I'm very familiar with.
And where does courage come into this for you?
Certainly, it has a lot to do with two things. On one end of the spectrum, it would be not knowing what the hell I'm doing and being okay, and creating spaces where everyone can feel safe not knowing what we're doing, which is anytime you're going beyond where you've been. Anytime. You are not an expert in the dynamics of the future of your organization. You become one once it becomes the status quo. And so that's certainly one end of it. And then I think the other courageous moment is really just coming to a place of clarity on where in the mosaic of human beings required to come together to lift up anything of substance, to really knowing where your genius lies, and then discovering the genius of others needed in those various mosaic tiles to bring the whole thing together. And so part of that's been actually a practice I've been working on for quite a bit of time, which is even treating myself as a special resource within my own organization to put into play thoughtfully and not just sort of take the assumed position of command and control.
Oh, so much there. You're making me also think about, it's not just, I mean, it's hard enough to see that for ourselves, but then how do you also allow others to see it?
Yeah. And that, you know, it's funny you say that because this has come up a lot. There are limits to our ability to describe to another an experience we've had. And yet we try as we might inside of organizations. And most businesses these days are not just complex, they're abstract, where there's a population of people that are literally in the field of play that see the side effects of the work directly. And then there's all the parts and pieces that happen beforehand or in some stratospheric level around it that never bear witness to actually what's happening. And you know, when the difference, right? When someone's trying to, like, imagine someone trying to explain to you what swimming's like. How many words would they need to use? And none of it would make any difference. Come get in the water with me. No words needed.
Yeah. Splash is the word that I'm thinking. I don't know what else to say.
What's your attitude on language on this podcast?
Whatever, go for it.
Get in the fucking water. Like, come see it. Come see it for yourself so you can bear witness. Right? Like when you see the thing directly, all of a sudden you have this amazing set of epiphanies instead of when someone's describing an experience to you, it automatically limits it to their view. But then it's held as truth. It's not the truth. It's an interpretation. Like, my interpretation of this podcast is going to be different from your interpretation of this podcast, and they're both completely relevant. And likely, those various interpretations are where all that possibility lives, and yet we never... This is coming to something I think worth underscoring, which is a core belief about leadership, is that it can be only understood through experience. It can only be learned through experience. It cannot be taught in a book. It doesn't benefit from meticulous codification and answering the question, what is leadership? It's an art form that's ever unfolding, unique to the situation at hand, unique to the expression of the leader. And so those things, I mean, can you imagine reading a process book for painting a Picasso? So why are we creating process books for, do these 10 things, you're a great leader? It just, you wonder why it's not as many times as we've tried, and there's 60,000 books on the topic on Amazon alone. We have way too many words to know what we're talking about. So maybe it's something that doesn't benefit from more words.
Yeah, and what I'm really hearing is it's experiential, as is life, and the idea of, and everybody's experience, to your point, is individual, and there is no one truth of what that is. But that's one of the things too that I find now. There is this real need to define truth. There is this real need to define what it should and shouldn't be. And I mean, we've always been there, but I think that now, as people are struggling in a lot of ways, and as organizations are struggling, I'm curious for you, as you are, because your goal is to really support generative listening and to allow people to truly listen to each other and understand what's in the water, what it's like to be in the water, but to also speak to their own experience. Where do you get the most traction in being able to do that? I'm curious, how do you invite people into that water, and then how do you help to support their experience, their swimming when they're in it?
Well, I have a cheat, which is um, much to our argument that people don't want to engage in meaningful and vulnerable conversations. They're actually desperate for it.
Hmm.
And if given the chance, we'll dive in head first and have conversations of extraordinary depth, uh, just given a moment to do so. It's fundamental to the human condition. So all I do is open the door and give permission for people to have those experiences. And even, I introduce some very challenging questions for strangers to talk about with each other. And it's always amazing, even when I see the gaping maws of their faces as they think about the question I'm about to have them talk about, and then literally a few minutes later struggle to pull them out of the conversation. We're literally in a time that we're experiencing listening deprivation, and it's actually playing out in all kinds of horrible side effects around the globe as it relates to our disconnectedness and loneliness and all of the horrible side effects that come with those two things. We are desperate, and we know, like, at the center of it all, the number one attribute of a meaningful, fulfilling life is depth of connection with another human being. Yeah. And we've created a sort of a narrative that has us chasing all of these things and so busy on all these things that frankly don't matter, that we're passing right by the moments that give us life. And then we wonder why we're so, as accomplished as we may become, why doesn't it feel really good? Why do I still feel unfulfilled? So let's just go get more, right? Yeah. And then the cycle repeats itself. And we're just missing those beautiful moments where, again, I believe it's the connections between two people, the idea that everything's in every moment, if we're willing to be present to it. That's where the fulfillment, that's where the life is. And we rush by them.
So beautifully said. And the idea of the more that the further we go, we tend to just get more and more hollowed out. And then we try to fill it with these things, and they don't do it. We just need to go back to what truly does and be honest about how we do that.
Oh man. I mean, it is the one thing that is important to know about powerful, we're talking about narratives here, right? This idea of intersubjective narratives, these are just narratives we share, whether we know it or not, and we're operating inside of them. I mean, that idea of just, the next thing, to be able to afford the next toy or the whatever it is, or, it's a seductive sucker. And, it's important to think about like and it's all neurological. We're just gaming our brains to, get hooked on certain chemical hits. Yeah. And what we're finding is these ones are the ones that the chasing one is, we'll say, a counterfeit chemical hit. It doesn't last very long, and then we're just left craving more. Mm-hmm. Versus the real thing. And I think that's one of the things important that we recognize is that, these narratives that we're living in are really compelling and seductive. In fact, their power comes primarily from the fact that we don't even know we're in one. It's invisible to us. It becomes the water we swim in, and then we don't even know that that's what we're operating in. And even in my own, professional and personal development, even in recent years, realizing I was living inside of a narrative that I didn't even know was there, that came from when I was 13 years old, that left an open wound that I never addressed. And in that lack of addressing it, it was at work on me for years, until I, through some help, discovered that there was a thing there that I needed to forgive and release it. And it just amazes me, like, when we really unpack some things, so like, holy cow, so much of this stuff that has me so stressed out isn't even mine, has nothing to do with me, and I've spent all my life worrying about these things. It was programmed into me. It was, whatever it was, somebody else's ideas that I glommed onto and got stuck in my backpack. And we can burn a lot of cycles of life operating in somebody else's narrative that wasn't ours to begin with.
Yeah. Well, you're making me think also about the idea of, what's in the water. So, and I know we both love the water story with the fish and the older fish saying, howdy boys, how's the water? And the fish are like, what's water? Yeah. And you're making me think of the idea of the narratives that we're carrying around, whether we put them there, whether we put them in the backpack or they were there, but we live with them and we carry them and we perpetuate them. And I know that that's something that is really intrinsic to the Courage Effect this season. The idea that, you don't just live and work in an environment, you create it. So I'd love to hear from you. How are you doing that now, and how are you encouraging leaders to do that so that they can have broader change?
Yeah, well, it kind of brings me to some of the cutting edge of what we're up to, which is even addressing the narrative of leadership that most are unaware we inherited.
Yeah.
And that we've been sort of living inside the vestiges of a 150-year-old narrative that has certainly created great things in the world, and at the same time we're clearly experiencing the limits of it through the insane burnout rates of leadership, the fact that we've got two generations coming into the workforce that want nothing to do with it. One would argue the inconsistent quality of leaders we're producing. Couching that one carefully.
I was going to say that's a very nice way of saying that.
Right? Across multiple categories, right? That's certainly one of them. But, to speak to what you were sharing directly, because, you and I pay attention certainly to that water piece, and every story you've shared, and you're so just raw about it's awesome, just makes the point so sharp. What I've been really encouraging my clients to be thinking about is, we'll say there's like three levels of listening within an organization. Level one would be I'm listening and observing behavior, which is where most of us are operating, is just what's the behavior, what do I like, what do I don't like, and then we manage it one way or another, indirectly through passive aggressive techniques or directly through drive-by management techniques, whatever it may be. But we fail to miss the other layer of listening, which is listening for the experience people are having.
Yeah. Behavior,
in large part, if not exclusively, is a byproduct of the experience people are having, right? You tell that great story about the airplane and why'd you come? This kind of thing. And, it's clear, right? And so what I've been encouraging leaders to really start to pay attention to, get curious about, is what's the experience people are having of me and this place? And how is that experience driving the choices they're making that I see as behavior? If you start paying attention to the experience people are having, that gives you massive insight and massive leverage, because then you can start to create new experiences. So many, I find a pretty common pattern where we'll say a leadership team's biggest complaint about its team is a pattern they're creating based on the experience their team's having of them. And it doesn't mean bad experience. It's just like, what can I count on? I talk about the fact that human beings, by our very nature, are cunning and clever. And we will find, and always will find, our way to get done what we need to get done in the easiest risk-free way as possible as it relates to, doing our jobs. And so we're actively gaming the limits of the system we're in to try to get done what we need to get done. Yeah. And oftentimes so many cycles of organizational energy are wasted in the gaming practice as opposed to the awakening practice around, well, what are the obvious roadblocks or behaviors coming from either the design of the organization or the behavior of leadership that has everyone having to work around us?
Yeah, we're fixing, we're not solutioning. That's what I hear.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So that's been a real powerful sort of introduction for leaders to say, what if you spent a month just paying attention and being wildly curious about the experience people are having, and start to ask yourself, what is it about that experience that has this behavior be their logical choice? Why are they withholding? Why are they not speaking in meetings? Why are they, whatever it is? Well, there's something about the experience that has it be that way. So find out. And then the third layer of listening is listening for the narrative. What are the stories that run this company? Both the intentional stories we're trying to cultivate. Are those stories anyone can hear except leadership? Are they even in the system? Most of them are withheld. Especially ideas about the future are withheld or held only amongst a handful of people. And then, of course, where the majority of the narratives are that organizations operate in are hearsay and narrative and gossip, which is all the conversations happening informally outside of those intentional channels where the real work gets done. So if we start paying attention to those stories, right? What are the stories people bring home at night when they talk to their families about this place? What are the stories our customers say about us? There's an interesting research that's been going on for years that says that organizations only use about 10% of their resources to listen, and rarely themselves. And so that's where the leverage is, because of the fact that we're operating inside of a narrative. People's behavior is a byproduct of experience. And if we spend time listening those things, that's where all the leverage is.
I love that. I love that the leverage is outside the echo chamber.
Yeah.
Do you find that when you go to I've obviously heard of multiple levels of listening and different channels and how that works, but I haven't heard it through the idea of like the narratives, like that actually being a level of listening. And I think that's brilliant. I love it. I'm wondering, when you're sort of revealing that or surfacing that within organizations, do you find that people are prepared to go there, that they're willing to challenge it and are willing to investigate it, or are they getting defensive? Because it's almost identity.
Yeah, it certainly can be. I mean, it's a pretty sobering inquiry for any leader to take on. And to the degree in which you're willing to take it on is the same degree in which you could change everything, is how do people experience me?
Yeah.
And what about those experiences are making the difference and which are not? Now, I want to be real thoughtful here. And you mentioned it earlier about this binary. There's a right and wrong way to do this. There's a right way and a wrong way to lead. I find that a binary is incredibly dangerous and limiting view. Yeah. I look at it as, is it making the difference or not? And so as it relates to people's attitudes toward this work, I would say, to the degree two things are at least true, is the same degree in which this work will penetrate and go beyond ego and soften the walls around those things, is one, the leader's ambition for their own growth and wanting to be the best possible human they can be. And two, I can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
So to the degree, it's often a combo punch of those two things. I have ambitions to take things further than they are. The way it is, I can't take anymore. Those are powerful catalysts to say, I'm ready to try something. I'm ready to go there. If someone is feeling satisfied and that they, by and large, are satisfied that they know what they're doing and they know how it all works, there's no point to work there, because they'll be impenetrable.
Yeah.
Right. It was like the courage is, or what is it? There's a great quote, something about putting aside what you're convicted about is the doorway to growth, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're also making me think of the idea. I mean, ego was what came up for me when you were talking about, the ambition and wanting to get to that place. The thing that I get really challenged by is that, as a coach especially, so much of the time when I get called in is when that breaking point that you talk about, like that, it's beyond sustainability, and a lot of the leaders know that themselves, or they might be lying to themselves a little bit as far as like what is sustainable truly for them or the organization versus not. But it's so hard when that dose of self-awareness comes in as a hammer, right? I mean, it's like the hard medicine that they're not in the best state of mind to be able to hear it. And I wish that I could get in earlier. I wish that we could start having that dialogue earlier. And I'm sure that it's the same for the work that you're doing. Yeah.
Well, it's there's one of the cardinal rules we teach as it relates to critical conversations, and that is no feedback without permission.
Yeah.
And feedback only privately. I think you and I could, based on the stories I've heard you share, and I've certainly got my share of them, most of the things we need to learn, we need to get punched in the face with. Because the only way it's gonna sink through this thick cranium of ours is if we smash our head into the wall hard enough over and over again, then it finally will sink in. And I call those things love punches. And I actually hold it as an expression of love. And I think one of the hardest expressions of love is, I'm going to share something with you that you are not going to want to hear, but need to if you intend on moving past your current state. And you may hate me on the other end of it, but I love you that much that I'm going to share it anyway instead of withholding it.
Yeah.
I mean, so I hold it as a genuine expression of love and care. And I think it's one of the hardest forms of it. And I can recount multiple love punches that I wouldn't be doing what I do without. And I'm so grateful for the people that delivered them. And I always like sort of squirm when I wonder how I reacted likely to it at the moment. And I think that's part of, something that we can practice deeply, which is to open up the space in which we can be mindful of our reaction so that we can be responsible for our reaction in the moment when we receive a love punch. Because if we aren't careful, when someone is bold enough to tell us what we want to hear, we may destroy the experience of them ever doing it again. And this is the pattern I see happen inside of organizations is, wow, now that I look at it, we are actively creating experiences that it favors people withholding the truth.
Yeah.
Because of fear of retribution, whether that be directly or indirectly. And they're subtle, right? Someone getting passed over, or they're being gossiped about as, oh, they're just a stick in the mud, or so-and-so has always just got a, critical point of view. I'm like, maybe they're actually trying to challenge the idea to make sure it holds up. Maybe, all these things that we sort of catalog into certain stories about people, that's actually us unwilling to hear what actually needs to be said. I mean, it goes back to blasphemy.
Blasphemy.
Right? I always like to think, if I feel a want to say that word based on what somebody's sharing with me, that's when I've retrain myself to lean in. Be like, there's something for me to learn here.
Yeah, it's funny because, well, I don't know if it's funny, but when I got my coaching certification, I called it my excavation. And it was exactly that. I mean, it was the idea of not just how do I unlearn and relearn, but how do I just dig in and open up and show other people things that I don't want to see it, and I don't want them to see it. And having to do fishbowl coaching, having to do it in a room of other people and seeing other people do it. And similar to what we did with Heroic, I mean, when you're in these incredibly vulnerable situations where, I mean, I don't know who didn't cry in those rooms, in the many, many hours of rooms, like, not to say that it was therapy, but there comes this point of just being open and vulnerable and held and seeing other people do that. There's just a certain level of currency and foundation that exists. And that to me is truly revolutionary in that way. Like it's the ground shifts, not that you have to get to that point, but understanding of what is possible and excavating. You have to excavate or at least acknowledge that what's constructed is constructed. And it's the courage to be the one that says, that's not really blasphemy. Or that, like, how do we change the narrative around this? How do we get to a point of also understanding that what we thought was true or what we thought was right is more about like control or ego?
Well, I mean, it's funny, like, again, sort of like level setting with a group. I'm like, can we all just come to terms with the fact that this idea of control is a delusion we keep telling ourselves? Have we not seen enough evidence that suggests the tighter we try to control the thing, the fragiler it becomes? Okay, great. So let's take that off the table. Yeah. Well, we were sort of talking about it earlier. Think about the level of the depth of trust and respect that you and I and every other member of that cohort has, that could have only come from all of us playing around with things that we didn't know what the hell we were doing.
Yeah.
And having those incredibly vulnerable experiences of, trying on new things and really being shitty at it, and just keep going and having breakdowns. Every single one of us. I remember it was the second of the 3 live sessions, and it was the second day where every single one of us was like, screw this, I quit, I'm giving up, right? It was I think it was a Monday evening, and then Tuesday we all had some sleep and then recovered the next day, and we just kept at it, right? But the fact that we all got to be there no one is an expert outside of our thoughtful and loving guides. Even they were like, no, we're not experts. We're just playing around with this stuff. But that have that experience and to think about like what, if you needed me to take care of your house and your loved ones, I would say yes.
Oh, get ready.
Right? And I'm sure, like if you were to make it up, and, I would be like, hey, I need you to, I don't have young kids anymore, but like, whatever, ask you for something really, really heavy without question. And where does that come from? Right? It comes from the depth of relationship and respect and trust we built by all of us screwing around with stuff we had no idea what we were doing.
Yeah, and doing it with each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it speaks a lot that, I mean, it's so interesting. It's so interesting. And I remember because I think I was one of the first people that cried when I was up on that stage talking about watching an oil spill of all things. And then it was like, we went out that night and everybody's like, what was that about? Why were you so upset about that? I'm like, I don't know, but obviously I was. So, I mean, it's sort of like, as you talk about like the backpack, I'm like, okay, what is in that backpack that I didn't necessarily know was there? Or maybe what haven't I paid attention to? But I keep going back to the idea of narratives and the idea of what do I think is me, or what do I think is true, and what do I think I live in that I hold as right or I hold as correct, that is potentially getting in my way. And those for me have been the breakthrough moments of when I have really just cracked something open, where I've been able to say, maybe that's not the way, maybe that's not it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I find the most challenging views to have of the world are contrary to the one that's being propagated. Because I'm always skeptical of, why is this story being propagated? Who's benefiting from it? So let's use a simple example of, and the latest to seem to have succumbed to this is the weather channels, where they are making money by keeping your eyes glued to their news. And weather's always been a great channel because people want to know what the weather is. But now you'll notice it's been hyperbolized and catastrophized, where it's learned from the status quo of other media outlets is, let's make things that feel like they're rarely happening, make it feel like they're happening everywhere all the time. And you'll notice even in the headlines, it will say, disastrous weather coming, thousands at risk, and it will fail to tell you where. So that you
I didn't even think about that. That's so interesting.
So look at the language change you see in the Weather Channel.
Oh my gosh.
It has been hyperbolized to have you have to look. It's trying to pull you in to tell you a story that's happening in some isolated part of the world and making you think it's happening in your backyard. So there's some other, let's just say, more general ones. And this is one that comes up a lot. And I actually have I do a talk on this, which is the business case for an abundance mindset. The prevalent one, because it sells so much, is a scarcity mindset, which is you'll never have enough. And no matter how much you have, it will never be enough. And you're not enough. And so buy stuff. And a scarcity mindset, of course, certainly is great for business, but it also creates more scarcity.
Yeah.
It creates more of, this is mine, I got to get mine. And an abundance mindset, in the face of what arguably could show up as something that looks like and is easily argued as scarcity, is a courageous thing. To say, well, let's just imagine that we are enough and have enough. What would we go do next? How would we play this as generously and as big as we can, even in the face of a world telling us there's not enough, never enough, and you have to get more? And so the other one would be, and this came up, actually, I was getting a haircut earlier today, and we were talking about our reflexive storytelling that we tell ourselves when we don't know the full story. In the absence of understanding, we assume the worst. We seem to go there by default. We actually will, depending, take it to not a great place, if not terrible place, of our assumptions about what actually was going on in the absence of knowing what was going on. And there's a sort of principle that I've been really sharing with a lot of our clients, which is, what if you took the most generous interpretation? We have to recognize, we're going to make an interpretation until we understand the truth anyway. why not pick the most generous one? And then it just alleviates and creates a space in which we can actually reveal the truth. When we go in with a catastrophized assumption of the truth, it'll automatically have the other withhold the truth because we're already coming at it with a negative story.
Yeah. Yeah. The cynicism.
It's just that framing, right? We can choose that framing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I like that. The generous view, the generous listening, right? And the idea that even if somebody tells you something, there has to be some shred of reality or some shred of value in it. You just have to find it.
Yeah.
But you have to start by believing it exists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even, oftentimes we dismiss people's points of view in the absence of even getting a chance to know who this person is.
Yeah.
Because we make up a story about who we assume them to be based on whatever, and then we just dismiss our listening for them.
Yeah, so dangerous, and we just.
That's why we see, I'm sure you've seen this in all of your background, where organizations favor people that think like they do, and then before long we collapse all the thinking into the same thinking, and I can almost predict the other side of that is the collapse of that very organization, and it usually is.
Yeah, the groupthink, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love talking to you. I could talk to you forever. But I also, and I'm sure that everybody's enjoying listening. I'm sure that everybody's enjoying listening to this, but I also want to give people their time. Thank you for all of the work that you do. Thank you for being the provocateur. And thank you for bringing that challenge to the table of what is possible outside of the stories that we tell and the stories that we could be telling. For me, you in so many ways do embody courage because you bring about challenge. You bring about blasphemy. You don't even just sort of invite it and you celebrate it. So as we wrap the conversation, and maybe we do that through the thread of courage, what resonates for you right now?
Well, I think what's missing in our day-to-day lives is simply taking the time to engage with those right around us in conversations about their hopes, ambitions, and dreams. What I find is when we engage in conversations about that, it actually elevates everyone involved and it enriches the narrative of what human beings are actually capable of. And there's a challenging aspect of leadership narrative is the assumption that those stories can only come from the top.
Yeah.
When in fact, the story that is already in the organization is the most powerful one that it could live into, yet it remains unlistened. And even with our own families, even with our spouses, is when was the last time we had a conversation about hopes, ambitions, and dreams? There's so much life there and we spend little time on it. So I just sort of love to leave any listener encouraged to go have that conversation with someone they love.
I love having the courage to have the conversation, but the courage to listen. I was just talking about that last week. I was doing a presentation and I said, listening is courageous.
Oh man, that is an act of courage.
It is.
Especially when you're listening without any agenda or need to say a thing, just to be fully available for the other to pour into and to be able to squash judgment and filters that distorts or has the other hide.
Yeah, and the vulnerability of that too, and sometimes discomfort, but you got to go there and who knows what it will give you, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Brent, thank you for being you. Thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for this conversation.
Well, it's a one-time creation that could only happen between your listening and what came out. So thank you for the opportunity.
All right. Be well. Thanks everybody for listening. Stay courageous. Thanks for spending time with me at The Courage Effect. Before you go, a reminder. The way that you lead is the way that you live. There is no brave version of you at work that shows up small everywhere else. Courage does not compartmentalize. It is a daily practice in the small choices you make that nobody claps for. That is the work that we do at Weller Collaboration, helping leaders to stop performing leadership and start practicing it from a lived, real place. For more information, check out wellercollaboration.com. If this episode gave you something, please listen to our next one. That's how you can give back. Share it with somebody else who is wrestling with their own brave next step, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. A quick thank you to my guest, to Dave Nelson for creating our theme music, and to Heather Gronick for her administrative magic. I am Suzanne Weller. Keep choosing courage, one honest moment at a time. I'll see you for our next show.